Okay, welcome to Mitzvah of the Week. This week is, excuse me, Parsha Vayera. And Vayera opens up with an interesting pasuk. Oh, and you know what? I think I forgot to switch the names of Hashem too. If anyone printed it, you probably want to bring it to the shul for Geniza. It's on me. Don't feel like you have to pay for it, but it's my mistake. I will transform them now. Okay. Oh gosh, that really messed this one up. How strange. Okay, so the pasuk is the first one in our parsha, and it describes the scene of Abraham um, post Brit Milah, right? So our mitzvah last week was Brit Milah. This week, Avraham is sitting outside of his tent. Vayera elav Hashem be'elonim mamre v'hu yoshev petach ohel kechom hayom. Right? Avraham is sitting in the entrance of the tent as the day grows hot, and Hashem appears to him in that place in Elonim mamre. Rashi says, what does that mean, Vayar elav? Why did Hashem appear to him? Levaker et hacholeh, to visit the sick. Amar Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, Yom Shlishi lemilato haya, uva HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'sha'al bishlomo. It's a beautiful Gemara in Baba Metzia. Why did Hashem come to Avraham? Not to give him any news, not to ask him to do anything, but simply to pay him a Bikur Cholim call. He saw that Avraham was not feeling well on the third day after his bris, and he came to ask about his health. Sha'al bishlomo. The Gemara loves stories of Bikur Cholim in general, and we'll look at one of them. Right, the rabbis did a lot of visiting of the sick, but first, they're trying to figure out what kind of mitzvah this is. And so, interestingly, the place where we hang it, right, the pasuk that we say, oh, maybe this is a doraita mitzvah, is from Devarim. Right, Rabbi Chama bar Rabbi Chanina says, "Ma'ay dichtiv acharei Hashem Elokechem telechu." Right, what does it mean where the pasuk says that you should walk after God's ways? You should follow in God's ways. Right, could a person really follow the Shekhinah? What does that mean? Right, we anthropomorphize God, but we can't follow God. Right, didn't we say that Hashem is a consuming fire? And so obviously we can't be close to the fire, nor can we be a consuming fire. Right? This is very beautiful, I think, sort of a well understood explanation that we follow in God's path by emulating God's attributes. Mahu malbish aromim dichtiv vayas Hashem la'adam ulishtok tonot or v'yalbishem. Right? Just as God clothed the naked, and the proof text is from Breshit, where Hashem gives Adam and Chava clothes. Also, so too we should dress the naked. HaKadosh Baruch Hu biker cholim, right? God visited the sick. Dichtiv vayera elav Hashem be'elonim amrei, right from our Parsha. Baker cholim. So too you should visit the sick, right? And then we go on that Hashem is nichem avelim, and we see that because Hashem appears to Yitzchak after Abraham has passed. And Hashem is kavar metim, right? Hashem buries the dead as he buries Moshe. Afata kover metim, right? And so I think this is extraordinarily beautiful, because what is it saying? It's saying that the command is actually not bikur cholim. Right? We shouldn't do the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim because God did. We should try to emulate God in the way that God behaved to people, so too we should. And our Parsha is the very kernel of that example of Bikur Cholim. Right? So when we fulfill the mitzvah of B'halachta b'drachav, following in God's ways, the way to do that, the way to fulfill that mitzvah is to be Bikur Cholim, is to be Malbish Arumim, is to be Kavar Metim. Well, I skipped one that I've already forgotten, right? Is to be Nichem Avelim, right? So when we do those things, it's not a mitzvah in and of itself, it's a mitzvah of imitating Hashem. So from this point, I think we could say we could go either way, right? We could make a case for D'Oraita or D'Rabbanan, and we'll see that we can't decide. But I did want to bring two other. This Gemara from Baba Metzia is not the exact reference from Rashi, but it's very close to that space. Um, and it's talking about, right, we can see the Sefaria notes that are very helpful that the Gemara is citing a source for going beyond the letter of the law and performance of mitzvah. So doing something above and beyond. Right, and Rav Yosef teaches, "V'hodatem lahem ze beit chayehem et haderech zog milut chasadim asher yilechu ze bikur cholim ba zo kvura ve'et ha'maaseh ze hadin asher yasun zo lifnim mishurat hadin." So there is a pasuk, right? And I should have brought the pasuk from Shmot, but it's v'hodatem lahem haderech asher yilechu ba hamaaseh asher ya'asun, right? And Rav Yosef is parsing out each word to show things that we should do, right? So v'hodatem lahem teaches about teaching people trades, right? The structure of their livelihood. Et haderech is referring to acts of kindness. Asher Yelechu, that is referring to Bikur Cholim, right? So all of these things again fit into some kind of framework of a Torah law. And then to say that this is a very serious mitzvah, even if we land in the Derabanan category, there are so many stories. We could have just looked at Agadata about rabbis visiting each other when they are sick. It's like a fascinating topic area. I'm sure someone has written a whole book or compendium of them. But here is a story that I think highlights how very important Bikur Cholim is. Of course, imitating God probably puts it in a pretty high category anyway, but we see it, maybe what I would say is that the stakes are high in Bikur Cholim. Rav Chelbo be'esh. Rav Chelbo became sick. La ika daka ate, and no one went to visit him. Now, possibly, and we'll see this a little bit in the halachic literature, is that there was a fear that when you went to do Bikur Cholim, you took on some percentage of the person's illness. And so it's possible that they didn't want to visit Rabbi Chelbo because they were scared of becoming sick. Or perhaps they were scared of him dying. Amar lahu, Rav Kahana said to the Chachamim, Lo ka chaya ma'aseh b'talmid echad mitalmidei Rabbi Akiva shechala? Didn't this happen with one of the students of Rabbi Akiva who also sort of became sick like Rabbi Chelbo did? Lo nichnasu chachamim levakro. The Chachamim didn't go visit him. V'nichnas Rabbi Akiva levakro, but Rabbi Akiva went. B'shvil shekivdu v'ritzvu lefanav chaya. And because they swept and sprinkled the floor, right, the dirt floor, they somehow cleaned the room maybe a little bit, he recovered. Amar lo, and the sick person said to Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi, hachayantani, you made me revived. Yatsa Rabbi Akiva v'darash, and Rabbi Akiva left this scenario, this experience, and he taught, Kol mi she'ein mevaker cholim ki'ilu shofech damim. That if you don't go visit the sick, it's as though you are killing that person. Because we know what happens to people who don't have visitors is they die. And the visitors, hachayani, they revive the sick person. Right, so I think from both, from both ends is sort of is how I was thinking about it. We see the importance of the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. On the one hand, from the positive side, we're being imitating God, which is certainly a very high mitzvah. And on the other hand, it's actually not about Hashem and our relationship with Hashem, but about the sick person's relationship, right? About the decision of life or death that this person is hanging in the balance between those two spaces, right? So the rabbis highly prioritize Bikur Cholim. We see that Hashem visits Abraham in our Parsha as Bikur Cholim. What does the halacha have to say about it? So the first source that I brought you, I'm just bringing up the biography of this lovely person, the Sefer Mitzvot Katan. He is one of the only ones to codify this mitzvah as a D'Oraita mitzvah. His name was Yitzchak ben Yosef of Kordibin, Yael, who died in 1280. Um, and one of the books that he wrote was the Sefer Mitzvot Katan. It was meant to be a commentary on the Sefer Mitzvot Gadol. So that is often called the Smag, Samach Mem Gimel. Sefer Mitzvot Katan is the Smak. And it was originally called Amudei Hagolah, and it's actually written like a poem. So I ended up excising the rest of it because it was too tricky for me to translate into English. It's not translated on Sefaria. It includes halacha and also agadata and stories and musar. It's based on the Sefer Mitzvot Gadol, but it doesn't explain the argument behind every decision. And this was well received in the Ashkenazi community. So as I said, a lot of different rabbis had different lists, right? We've looked at the Sefer HaChinuch, which lists out the mitzvahs by Parsha. Notably, he does not list a mitzvah for this Parsha, meaning he is not counting this as one of the 613. The Rambam wrote the Sefer HaMitzvot. We'll see the Rambam feels strongly this is not a Doraita mitzvah. The Sefer Mitzvot HaKatan, he says, cholim dichtiv v'halachti b'drachav. Right, so he quotes that pasuk that the rabbis quoted in the Gemara from Devarim, and he says that Bikor cholim is an expression of the biblical mitzvah of walking in God's ways. He stands alone on one side, and the Rambam is actually very clear about it. It's not just that he doesn't list it in his list, but he goes out of his way in the halachot around Avelim to explain that this is derabanan. Mitzvat aseh shal divreihem levaker cholim. Right, divreihem, the words of the rabbis. It's a positive commandment of rabbinic origin. Levaker cholim, to visit the sick, lenachem avelim, lahotzi hamet, right? What do these remind you of? These are on the list, right, in the Gemara of ways that we imitate God by visiting the sick, by comforting the mourners, and by burying the dead. The mitzvah list goes on, to escort a bride, ulilavot orchim, to accompany guests, ulitasek b'chol tzarchei hakfura, to attend to any needs of a burial, to walk before the bier, to mourn, to dig a grave, to bury the dead, to make the bridal couple happy, and to help them in all of their needs. Right? So we say this in morning shacharit. This is the list of things where there's no limit to the reward that you will get for them. So the Rambam says, listen, even though these are really important, they are still just derabanans, but they sort of fall under the umbrella of the command to love your neighbor as yourself. So interestingly, the Rambam still wants to anchor it in the Torah, but he picks a different source than the Smak. And he explains because these were all things that if you needed them done, you would want them done by someone too. And so too, you should do these things for your comrade in Torah, right? Your brother or sister in Torah and mitzvot. Okay, so far the Smak says it's a doraita. The Rambam says it's a derabanan, but he goes on to say, I think that I'm not an expert in the Rambam, but it seems to me that there's like a little bit of anxiety about quote unquote downgrading this mitzvah to a derabanan. And so he goes on to say, Bikor cholim mitzvah al hakol. Everyone has to do this mitzvah. Afilu gadol mevakeret hakatan. Even a great person must visit someone of sort of like lesser stature. We're going to look into this sentence, but you should visit someone many times throughout the day. Right? It's great to keep doing more as long as it does not become burdensome to the person. Right? This, the Rambam is echoing what's found in the Gemara, that if you visit a sick person, you remove a portion of their sickness and you relieve them. V'chol she'enu mevaker, echoing Rabbi Akiva, ki'ilu shofech damim. Rabbi Winter, I'm so glad you're here because you are a chaplain, so I know that you have visited many a sick person. And if you want to share, I invite you to share. I started chaplaincy this year. I don't know if people know that, as a resident. So I too have become a full-time Bikor Cholim person on some level. And I felt that these were very resonant. Right? You don't want to make it about you. You don't want to visit for too long. You don't want to visit too many times if it tires the person. But I think this idea that you remove a portion of the sickness, not that you become sick, but that you alleviate the symptoms maybe of sickness by providing Bikor Cholim is really a very beautiful idea. Um, I brought from the Rav Tabori, which is what I've been basing many of these shiurim on. He quotes Rav Aaron Soloveitchik, and I apologize that I did not track down the book so I could bring the entire quote. But he wrote in 1933 that this issue explained this issue by demarcating the exact parameters of love your neighbor and follow in his ways. Right. So Rav Aaron is mentioning both the Rambam and the smack, right? That they both, this mitzvah falls sort of in both categories because these mitzvot, love your neighbor and follow in his ways, fall in the realm of chovot halevavot, duties of the heart. They are obligations to internalize love of your neighbor and to develop personal characteristics such as mercy and compassion that were shown to us by God's actions. However, there is no biblical requirement to manifest these feelings by doing any specific action, right? Bikor Cholim is not the oraita manifestation of these mitzvot. Our rabbis then dictated specific directions and guidelines on how to activate these internal feelings, right? Maybe you cultivate the internal feelings, the rabbis are giving you like surefire ways to help you externalize them, right? Quick tips. When an individual does so as commanded by our rabbis, he demonstrates externally his internal feelings, which are a biblical fulfillment of the mitzvah. I think this is walking a fascinating line between like derabanan and deoraita, right? If you do the derabanan, you get the deoraita. It's like hard to separate them in some ways. Um, Okay, so I brought us some of the Shulchan Aruch here. The Yoredea has more. I think it is about 8 seifim, maybe 9. I brought the first 5, which goes through the halachot. And I think it's interesting to note, right? I think and I'm speaking about myself in addition to everyone else, when I go do Bikur Cholim, like, if someone from the shul is in the hospital and I'm able to visit them or in their home, I think like, oh, what a nice thing I'm doing. But do I think I'm doing a mitzvah, like fulfilling a mitzvah when I bench my lulav and etrog or, you know, all the mitzvot are escaping me at this moment, Davin Mariv with a minion, right? Or do I think I'm like being a mitzvah girl, right? As we would say, right? Like doing something nice. And I think that part of it is because there's no bracha associated with Bikor Cholim, right? Even though it is clearly a mitzvah, whether durabanan or doraita, there are no brachot on mitzvot ben adam l'chaveiro. And so we don't step outside the hospital room and quickly say, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam asher kitshanu tivanu levaker cholim, right? We just go do the mitzvah. And so I think we've lost some of like the technicalities, right? Just as we worry about building a sukkah to the exact right parameters, I don't think that we think about the parameters of Bikor Cholim as laid out here in the Shulchan Aruch. And the Shulchan Aruch is writing at a different time. Being sick sort of look different. Visiting sick people look different. And so we have to sort of contend with that as well. I think that the first and maybe even the most important is this idea that Hagadol Yelech Levaker HaKatan. That it is important for important people to visit less important people, whatever that means exactly. And that you should visit a lot, right? The words of the Rambam. Kama pamim bayom, va'afilu ben gilyo, right? Even if it might, if the visitor is of his affinity, v'chol hamosiv harei zeh meshubach, u'bilvad shelo yatriach lo, right? That we don't want to bother them. The Ramah, right, the Ashkenazi gloss to the Shulchan Aruch, adds a fascinating note Ayesh omrim desoneh yachol lelech levaker chola. If you had an enemy, chas v'shalom, I'm sure no one here has enemies, could you go visit your enemy should they land in the hospital? Um, and what does he say? V'lo nir'eh ela lo yivaker chola v'lo yinachem avel shehu sono shelo yachashav shesameach li'ido ve'eno lo ela tza'ar. Right? He says, it doesn't seem plausible to me that you would want to go visit your enemy. But he should not visit a sick person nor comfort a mourner whom he hates because we don't want them to think in any way that they're rejoicing, right? So if chas v'shalom I had an enemy and I went to the hospital to visit, he might think I came to gloat. And so it's better not to visit at all. V'chein nireli. Right, so the Shulchan Aruch says maybe you could visit, or he doesn't say it explicitly, but the Ramah says maybe you could visit someone that you don't like, but maybe it's actually better not to. Then the Shulchan Aruch goes on to the choreography of such a visit. You shouldn't sit on the person's bed. Not on a chair, not on a bench. Rather, you should wrap yourself reverently and sit in front of the sick person because the divine presence is above the top side of his bed. So that's a beautiful idea that maybe Hashem goes to visit all of the cholim and that Hashem's presence is in the room. And so you should be very reverent in front of the person. But the Ramah points out that this is like actually about when sick people used to lie on the ground. But it is actually allowed to sit like at eye level. You don't have to stand up over. V'chei nohagim. This is the way we do it. So, right, the Shulchan Aruch is imagining a place where you might have to lie on the floor, and then you shouldn't sit sort of above them. But the Ramah is saying, listen, in the hospital, you sit in a bed, and someone can sit next to you in a bed, and you could be like at face to face in that way. The Shulchan Aruch says you should not visit someone in the early morning hours, b'shalosh sha'ot rishonot shel yom, mipnei shekol cholem mikil alav chalav baboker, because the sick person's sickness is not always so bad in the morning. V'lo yachush levakesh alav rachamim v'lo rachamim. And so we might not actually feel so bad for him, right? If you go visit someone in the hospital and you're like, oh, you look great, right? Then you might not offer the right appropriately felt tefillot for that person. But also not in the last 3 hours of the day, because sha'az machabir alav chalav, his sickness is like very heavy on him. V'yityaesh milavakesh alav rachamim, and you might say, oh, well, he's a goner. No bother davening for him, right? It's it's interesting to think that like we would respond so directly to how the person looks. So if they look good, we wouldn't daven for them. If they look bad, we'd be like, well, we can't. Why even bother? And then interestingly, if you go to someone's room in the hospital or someone's house and you say, could I daven for you? And they say, yes, I would like to hear it in English. You should daven in English. But if they say, oh, you could daven for me when you go home, I don't need to hear it here. Then the Shulchan Aruch feels that tefillot for a sick person said in Hebrew have greater strength. And I feel this way in the hospital. Again, I welcome your thoughts about it or anyone else who visits people in the hospital. If someone asks me to daven in English, I daven in English. But if they say, just add me to your list, I add them to like my refuah shlema list, and then I would just daven in Hebrew. I wouldn't daven in English, but it's an interesting idea. And then I brought this halacha yomit from the OU about Bikur Cholim. What I think is cool about it is you can see now, because we've sort of looked at some of these sources, it will look familiar, right? This first paragraph is just a summation of the Shulchan Aruch, right? That even distinguished people should visit people of lower stature. Even if you wouldn't ask like a great Rebbe or a leader in the community to do something demeaning, like returning lost objects, we don't think it's demeaning to do Bikur Cholim. And then he quotes some interesting people. He says, theoretically, the mitzvah of visiting the sick is incumbent on all people at all times. Rav Zilberstein, the Chashukei Chamed, quotes his brother-in-law, Rav Chaim Kanevsky, that one is not obligated to constantly visit all the sick people wherever they may be. Bikur Cholim is a mitzvah only when the visit will be meaningful and beneficial for the person who is ill. I think that often we do Bikur Cholim for ourselves to make ourselves feel better, like we've done something to help someone. And so I think it's really beautiful that the OU is reminding us this is for the sick person. And if it's not meaningful and beneficial for them, then it's not worth it. In a similar vein, the Tzitz Eliezer writes a lot about medical situations. Here he quotes the Sefer Lashon. He was a modern Israel, lived in Israel Torah scholar. He quotes the Sefer Lashon Chachamim that one should not visit someone who will be uncomfortable or it will be a burden for him or her to carry a conversation. So don't go to the hospital to visit if they're wearing like a gown and they don't have a head covering or they haven't shaved in a week and they're not going to want to see people, right? That it will make them uncomfortable. Or if it's just too hard, it takes too much effort for them to have to carry their part of the conversation. He suggests that for this reason, do not constantly visit those who are ill. Often people overstay their visit and do not know when to leave. We must remember that Bikur Cholim is a mitzvah to help the chola. And when a visit is overbearing or unpleasant for the chola, it is no mitzvah at all. I think it's a beautiful practical halacha yomit, which is why I brought it here. And I would love to hear everyone's thoughts. I think that what struck me about this mitzvah was trying to balance out the tension of like wanting it to be a doraita, right? To walk in Hashem's ways, surely that feels on a doraita level, while still balancing that it's a dirabanan expression of a doraita. Um, and thinking about how we often sort of downplay this mitzvah altogether into just a nice thing to do as opposed to the fulfilling of a mitzvah, how many more people might we visit if we really thought about A, wanting to imitate Hashem's ways, B, wanting to prevent death, right? If we think that visiting people really alleviates their sickness, and C, that it was truly the fulfillment of a mitzvah, that we might take it more seriously. So I think it is something that there are many mitzvah we can always strive to do better in. And again, speaking for myself, when I'm not working at the hospital, I don't always go to do Bikur Cholim. Sometimes it's because I worry that someone will be uncomfortable. And so while those are valid concerns, to remember that the halach de bedrachav is such a central and big mitzvah. And so to be able to do Bikur Cholim is like a beautiful mitzvah that we should all embrace in whatever ways we can, so to be as though we visited Abraham at the entrance of his tent in this week's Parsha, to bring it all back together. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts.
I have lots of thoughts.
Please. Yes, you're a doctor, so again, you're familiar.
I did Bikur Cholim professionally all my life. So, but nowadays I'm thinking of there is neuroscience, there is scientific demonstration that isolation is very harmful. That leads to depression. Even there's a suicide. People themselves if they don't see anybody. And solitary confinement in prisons considered cruel and unusual punishment. And some people even think it should be illegal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm reading a book right now, it came out recently. It's called Why the Brain Needs Friends, which is how the neuroscience that are, when you visit somebody, you are with somebody, if you hold somebody in the hand, the brain bubbles with hormones that one of them is oxytocin. It's called the love hormone. That's the hormone that when a mother breastfeeds the baby, oxytocin is circulating and increases production of milk, but it also gives a feeling of well-being in the brain. It's so by every possible means, looks like the Torah, the Bible, Abraham anticipated modern science of a few millennia. It's all there. It's all proven now.
That's amazing. So you're saying like this idea that we take away a bit of their sickness is actually physiological. It's not just like spiritual.
Yeah.
Wow.
Immunology during the COVID, the peak of the COVID pandemic, everybody was isolated. It was documented that there was a higher incidence of depression, and people that were alone had worse prognosis, worse outcome than people that were allowed to receive visitors. There are numbers showing that.
Yeah.
And even the practice of not sitting in the bed Today, there is a good epidemiologic reason. You don't want to get the bugs. Usually sheets are dirty. You don't sit in the patient's hospital bed. You sit in a chair next to the patient.
Hmm.
You look
I
in
like
the
that.
eye, you smile, and all that is good for everybody.
Amazing. Oh, Judith, you're muted.
There we go. Two thoughts. One about the Shekhinah at the head of the bed. A Torah teacher whom I respected a lot came from Tunisia, a community deeply rooted in Torah for many, many hundreds of years. And he said it was customary by them to, when you enter the room of someone who's ill, you bow towards the head of the bed for that reason, that the divine presence is resting there, and you should be aware that, he's hovering over the bed. I thought that was a beautiful image. I think of it whenever I visit someone. Um,
Wow,
but
that's beautiful.
I would kind of gloss on that maybe it's your presence is making that divine presence more
Mhm.
consciously, that people are more
Palpable.
conscious of it.
Hmm.
The act of visiting somehow stimulates that. About not going to visit your enemy
Hmm.
reminded me of an incident. My husband, who was a department chairman, got into an altercation with another department chairman at the chairman's meeting. And there was really some bad blood between them for some time. And I was not part of this. I mean, everybody knew the guy had a nasty temper and so forth, and he had some problems. But one day he wound up with a heart attack, a mild heart attack, but
Hmm.
just enough to set him really back mentally, why is this happening to me and all that.
Hmm.
Um, uh, he was at home most of the time recovering. I did not go visit him, but his wife was one of the secretaries, and I was friendly with her. And I had just finished reading a book at that time, groundbreaking, about how diet and exercise can overcome the heart
Hmm.
conditions. Now it's kind of taken for granted, all the
Hmm.
medical institutions have programs too. But this book was really hot off the press. So I gave her the book. I said, I found this very interesting. Maybe your husband would get something out of it. Weeks and weeks later, he stops me in the parking lot and he says, I have so much to thank you for.
Hmm.
That with all the people who sent well wishes or, you know, said nice things, you were the only one who actually did something that really meant a great deal to me. He read
Hmm.
the book. They took it seriously, tried to persuade his mother, to change her diet and all this.
Oh.
So I guess there's more than one way to visit, if you can think of something practical.
Hmm.
Well, it's recommended that before you go see the patient, or you call either
Um,
the
sure.
nurse or the wife or the somebody or even the patient himself. Mind if I come to see you?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you may say, no, I'd rather not. Or yes, yes, that would be a
Tell
plan.
the story.
Yeah. So you did the right thing.
I guess so.
Yeah, yeah, it worked.
It worked. That's the bottom line.
You know.
So you mentioned Rabbi Soloveitchik, Aaron
Hmm.
Soloveitchik. Um, and I have a Rabbi Soloveitchik story. I
Amazing.
was, I was a hospital social worker at the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago, as it was then called. And I was sitting in my office, and in walks this very elderly man with a cane, with somebody with him who accompanied him. And he wanted to know about the status of a patient from his community. It was Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik.
Hmm.
And that morning I had stopped at McDonald's for water. a McDonald's water cup on my desk. And Rabbi Soloveitchik wanted to know how this woman was doing. He was very concerned about her. And this was not a religious family by any means at all. It was, and the patient herself, we understood, was being abused by her family. And we were taking care of that. But he was concerned enough in quite late life, this was 30 years ago, with his cane to make it downtown to the hospital to see the social worker for this woman he was concerned about.
Wow.
And that he really stood by what he said. He really stood by his values, and he went out of his way to make sure that this woman was going to get the care and the help that she needed.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's wonderful. Right. I think that often we don't put our mouths where our money where our mouths are.
Yeah.
The mention about the physical action was that Judith talked about made the big difference in this man's recovery, apparent recovery. So at the hospital I'm at, downtown Northwestern, and there are other hospitals that do this also. But when we have the patients who come to the hospital with their families, and they're shomer kashrut, and they're very concerned about because the hospital does, have they don't want to eat the meals that the hospital gives them, even though they're entitled to them. They want to bring in their own food. They don't even want the frozen kosher dinners and stuff like that. And so what we offer them, it came with the help of the Chicago Mitzvah campaign. We offer them a small refrigerator. That we can put a small refrigerator in the room, and that they can bring in whatever, the food that they want to. It's a refrigerator that does not have a light inside, so they don't have to worry about Shabbat and opening the refrigerator. And they can put the food that they're bringing for dinner or for lunch. In some cases, the patient's not eating, but there's a family member who is staying overnight. So they're able to bring their own food there and not have to go out into the to the refrigerator that's in the nurse's station and so on. So and I have many occasions. I haven't counted them up, but what people will tell me after they are discharged or they're going to be discharged, or the family or whatever, they tell me that you saved my life by giving us the refrigerator. It's not that you just saved my life because you came in to visit or whatever, but you saved my life because you gave me this refrigerator, and it enabled me or my family or the family says it enabled us to have kosher meals and feel very comfortable because they're meals that we've cooked and that they have given us a sense of reassurance that we're doing the right thing, or that we're not don't have to worry about whether the food is under hashgacha, not under hashgacha, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a kind of a physical act or a physical object in this case that really gives people a great sense of hope and strength during the course of the illness.
We often talk about at the hospital about like a sense of dignity, and that by giving people their own choices, right, and you restore some dignity to them in that moment. That being in the hospital is very undignified generally.
Yeah, excellent point. Yeah, very good point. Yes, yeah, there is a loss of dignity, and to restore that is extremely important.
Also, a study has been done by the doctor that I was working with. He did a study with his residents of how long a patient thought that you stayed with them. And the resident was either standing or sitting. And if the doctor was sitting, the patient always said that the doctor stayed with them much longer than the doctor actually did. And if the doctor just was standing at the bedside and not sitting, the patient saw that as a very, very brief visit, even though both visits were the exact same amount of time.
That's amazing, right? I think it's something that the Ramah sort of understood to add to the gloss, right? It's like, sit down, stay a while, signify that you're there. I thought what we were going to say is someone just told me today that there was a study where if the doctor stayed in the room for, I think it was 3 minutes, patients said they stayed for 20. And if the doctor stayed less than 3 minutes, the patient said the doctor barely stayed at all. Right. And it was like just the investment of even a small amount of time felt large in recollection, whereas a short amount of time felt so minuscule. I thought it was a fascinating idea.
And if the doctor is on eye level with the patient, then that's an immediate bond, and the patient feels that the doctor has really spent time with them, as opposed to standing over them and looking down at them.
Nelson, you train doctors, right? Did I remember that correctly?
Yeah.
Do you teach any of these things like
Exactly the same thing. What Bobby said is absolutely true. There is data, lots of studies doing exactly the same thing. When I was in practice, I used to go around. I would always make sure I would tell the patient, do I have your permission to sit with you? And of course, doctor, you're the doctor. I wanted to impress on their minds that I had actively, deliberately made the effort to sit with them. Not only that, sometimes the chairs were occupied by, there was visitors or luggage or something. I would go outside and bring my own chair so they would see me. This doctor brought his own chair to see. And usually the young residents, the young students would say, oh, doctor, I'll carry the chair for you. Says, no, I want the patient to see me carry my own chair because it's very important to sit in the chair. And once I explained to the class what I was doing, there was one resident says, oh, now I understand why you always sit with the patient. I thought you were always tired. That's why. I may be tired, but this is that I give to sit with the patient. And Bob is absolutely right.
The patient said, I've got such a tired doctor, he can't even stand.
I think that what I'm hearing from the three of you, right, is that like medical care and Bikur Cholim are so intertwined that, and so we can't all be doctors, but we can all do Bikur Cholim, which is again so intertwined with the medical outcomes of a situation that it's such a powerful mitzvah, right? It's like not just about making someone feel nice, but it's really about helping hasten their refuah.
It's truly medicine.
Yeah.
It's like taking a pill.
It's taking away one. Traditionally, don't we say it takes away 1/60th of their sickness?
That's right. That's right. It's in that list of like, right, dreams or 1/60th nevuah. I don't remember them all, but Bikur Cholim is 1/60th of the illness. Takes
Rabbanit, I quick question for you. Do I recall that once you gave a really good shiur about the halachta bidrachos?
That is such a nice, what a beautiful question. I wish that I could remember this beautiful shiur I gave. It's possible, but I don't.
Remember one.
I'll have
Very
to look
quick
back in my
question about
notes. Yeah.
as far as that goes. As far as the smack is concerned, is the smack saying that the deraita, this sounds yeshivish, that the deraita is the halachta bidrachos or bidrachecha, whatever? Or is he saying the specific mitzvah is the deraita?
Okay, it's a great question. Right. What Rabbi Schwartz is asking is we've danced around the subject all night, right? Is the mitzvah v'halach lebedrachav, and this is a rabbinic suggestion of how to do that, or does Bikur Cholim actually become, right? Is that a fair way of saying it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I will tell you what Rav Tabori said, because right, I created my source sheet by adapting his essay, and he writes, Rav Yitzchak of Karbel counted the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim as one of the 613, Sefer Mitzvot Katan 47. So I don't think it's clear, and as I said, it's a very poetic work, And so it is confusing. It was confusing to me, the rest of the paragraph. It's not clear to me, but that certainly that's how Rav Tabori understood it. And he goes on to say that the Bahag also counted it as an independent mitzvah. So I think even if they're hanging it on a pasuk that is broader than the mitzvah, it seems that they are in fact counting it as its own mitzvah.
Thank you. That's exactly what I want to know.
Excellent. Glad I
Thank
read
you.
the whole essay. And it's linked. I don't know if you can click on the link the way that Karen sends it out, but I could put it in the chat because the whole essay is very good.
I'm thinking of an experience I had being in the hospital at a really inopportune time with an emergency situation that required some surgery, and I had to miss the baby naming for my second granddaughter. Um, so among the visitors, a devoted student arranged with her husband that he would sit at the ceremony with his phone on, and she would come to my room with the computer so that I could remotely participate, and I got to see the
Oh, that's so
ceremony, and that
beautiful.
was very nice. It really was lovely. And then she took off for the reception afterwards, and at least got to see that half. So I was feeling blessed that they even tried. And then one by one, people left the reception and came to my hospital room to give me a full report.
That's
And
beautiful.
the two who came and spent the most time both had had similar surgery and were also very curious to know, what happened. And I tell you, it was like the party in my room was almost more fun than I've had I been there. And I felt that that was a wonderful gift, not just visiting, but bringing something intangible that was very meaningful to all of us.
Beautiful. I love that. What the power of Bikur Cholim. So I will say in conclusion, the Shul Rabbi and me can't help but say there are many people who need Bikur Cholim in our community. And if you feel inspired to do this mitzvah more often and you would like someone to visit, Rav Ari or I would be, or Rav Hodi would be happy to set you up with someone who might need a phone call or a visit. Ride on the inspiration of all the stories that we just heard and from the sources. And I hope that you either, if you know someone who unfortunately is sick or you need someone to visit, that there will be many more instances of fulfilling this mitzvah of Bikur Cholim in our community.
Yeah. I'd like to just mention that concerns for personal privacy are very important,
Of
which is
course.
why they don't publish the names of people who are in the hospital or whatever. But it really has crimped the style of people who like, finding out and visiting and offering their services. It's
Yeah.
very different now than it was 20 years ago.
Yes. Yes. I would never just like post the list in the chat, but if you called the office and said, time and I'd like to visit, we certainly would share sort of names of people we thought might be receptive to a visit or might, be lonely in that way. So
You should always ask if the patient is accepting visits or wants to receive visits.
Sure.
yes. Yes, unless you work in a
Yeah.
hospital like Rabbi Winter, I would not just, or as Dr. Cantor did, I would not just sort of drop by a hospital room without calling. I think it's always worth the call to say, I'd really love to come visit you. Is there a good time today? Right? Maybe not the first 3 or last 3 hours of the day, somewhere in the middle.
Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't want to leave this before mentioning the Rabbi Ozarovsky's book, Rabbi Joe.
Mm,
He has a wonderful book,
Yes.
some of which is slipping my mind, but it's basically about Bikur Cholim, I mean, the whole history on all the sources. But the important part is the practical teaching he was offering at the time the book was written. I attended at least 2 workshops on visiting the sick where they would drill you on the skills of, it's easy to say it's not about you, it's about the patient, but our habits are such that most of us, our immediate response is, oh, yes, let me tell you about what happened to me like that, And that's not
mm,
the way. You're supposed to feed back to them their feelings and what they just
mm.
said and, to inspire inspire them to keep talking if that's what they want to do. It was very difficult. He paired us off, when we went through little scenarios, and it was extremely difficult to follow the rules.
Yes,
Nelson, do you
thank you
have his
for.
book?
Yeah.
Nelson, do you
I
have
have
his
a copy of the
To
book.
walk,
Yeah.
to walk in
Walk in
God's
God's
ways.
ways.
I was gonna say, so now we
Title of his book.
understand the title, right? Rav
Yeah.
Joe is beautifully alluding to the fact that this is a Doraita mitzvah, at least according to the Tanakh. Or perhaps referring to the Gemara's discussion of the same topic. But great title. And I should have said that we are blessed to have two career chaplains in our shul, Rabbi Winter, who is here, and also Rav Joe, who is also a wonderful chaplain. Amazing.
Yeah, that same hospital visit where I got all the company, the first person to come in and really brighten me up was Rabbi Joe Ozerovsky, who at that time was head of the chaplain's office there.
He is such a sweetheart of a guy.
Oh
Since
gosh,
he's
it
a
was
kid,
so
we
wonderful. It
were
was,
contemporaries in yeshiva and so on. He's
yeah,
just such a sweetheart.
Oh.
yeah. Well, he certainly lived up to the ambitions of the book. He was wonderful.
And his wife even more so. She was in my class.
They are both lovely people. Amazing. This was so lovely. I was so excited to talk about a complicated but also beloved mitzvah, and it was a beautiful conversation and exploration of sources. I hope everyone has a wonderful end to their week and a Shabbat Shalom. And may no one be sick, but if you are, I hope you get a beautiful visit from someone soon.
Very inspiring. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom and thank you.
Shalom.
Shalom. Thank you.
See you next week.
Thank you.